And so one of the things that we're going to be covering, just for those of you, we are early, so we've got 10 minutes before we begin. And so I'll just talk a little bit about what is a creator matrix and how did this whole program come to be, and what's leading you to this webinar. And so I'm going to tell you more than others will hear just because I'm sitting here with 10 minutes to go. Please know that your voices are really welcome and desired. So if you feel like popping in at any time and saying a word or two, just please know that I love to hear you. But basically, I've been a writer and storyteller and producer for many, many years. And I've been working on a really, really big book series. I wouldn't wish someone to have to write a book on my own worst enemy. It is quite the undertaking. And I've noticed that for my style of creating, this isn't everybody, I actually need what I learned was called psychic silence, meaning that like I really need everything in my life to be very still, in order, and at peace. And then I can be in that place where I can just truly listen for the story and for that inspiration, so that then my entire kind of life during these moments of creation are completely committed to it. It means that if you're going on a walk, and you're just talking about whatever, that person's inspiring your book, whether or not they're aware of it or what you're creating. Or you go to the bath, and that's a great place of inspiration. You go for walks, you see the news, and it's like all this stuff starts to just inform what you're creating, because all the focus is on that place. Not everyone creates like that. I'm so envious of these people who can write on buses and do things like that. That's just not my way. And so I got really inspired after teaching these classes for over 3 years now, to really help support people really understand what makes them tick as creators. There's no one way for any group of people. Gosh, if we aren't living in a world that's making that incredibly visible to us, and there's so many different ways. And I think the real opportunity and the gift, especially in this moment, is more than any other, is that we have perhaps more freedom than any other time to really understand what that means, and real opportunity to say, okay, what do I need to thrive in these times, and who am I as a creator? So all that to say that I was teaching these classes, and I really started to see that everyone has such different styles and needs really different things to thrive and succeed. And I had created this book called I actually hadn't created the book yet. I just created a technique for myself, basically, when I go into create. And that is what I call creating the psychic silence, that place where everything is kind of still and quiet and at ease. And so as I asked some of the folks that were studying with me at the time, I was like, would you like the guidebook on how to create psychic silence? And they were like, yeah, we really do. And then COVID broke out. And so my way of creating, which is to go away, just like you, there was nowhere to go. And so it was really, how do I create that space from my home? How do I create the sanctuary for creation in my home? And so that, while I was doing that during COVID, I really got to experience one of those kind of like rare, wild, absolutely divinely inspired, creative outbreaks where I was like, every night I was being woken up by dreams telling me what to put into the book and into the guidebook, into the process, and what to call things. And the term creator matrix came straight through a dream. And a lot of, and I was like, that is what we're doing. We're helping people understand the form and function of your specific design, to understand where your strengths are as a creator, and where your challenges are, where your weaknesses are. And if you're into human design and all those things, what I love about human design is that it literally shows you where your energy or breaks or is really strong. You understand that if you stand next to another person, your energy systems plug into each other. It's kind of wild. So together, it's like, if one of you is a starter and just can like start things, no problem, and one of you is a builder, and all you need is to be told what to do, and you can build anything. And then you need a finisher in the house, right? And so it's like, and then you've got those people that like, they don't like to start it and they don't like to build it, but then, man, I love to finish it. And now you've got a dream team. So it's a way of really understanding, if you've had some major things get in the way of your, then rather than, go into that shame body or what's wrong with me, coming back kind of to, ground zero and be like, oh no, it's just like, what do you need to succeed? I've been taking up gardening I've returned to it after 15 years. Thank you, COVID, for giving me time and space to be with the land that I live in. And I was just really remarking on, some seeds, they can transplant. It's really easy for them, no problem. Or some of them like to be really close in with others. Some of them need a lot of space, and some of them, if you touch them, they're done. Like they just don't like any jostling. And I was really thinking, well, that's a lot like humans, and that's even when we start thinking about, for the United States, which is the country that I'm coming into you from, where so many of, our entire country, I shouldn't say that, excuse me, the majority of our country immigrated from somewhere else. And some people thrive while being transplanted, and some people don't, when they're cut off from their roots. So what does that mean to us as humans? And how does that again come back to influencing, affecting who we are as creators? So that was a lengthy overview that you got because I'm wildly early today. And again, we'll start in just a few moments. But if you have any questions, or if there's anything specific that you're working with in terms of your creative process, I love to hear that, because what it will do is I will specifically focus on what you're tending to, and will shape the class according to you. So that was the reward for being, as some say, on time, which means a little early. For those of you who geek out on language, I love listening to phrases and that time on time. I'm writing this book, and one of the main characters in this book is a whale. So it's really fun just to get to put yourself in this other being and think in a way that you might never, ever think, and as I was doing that, all of a sudden I started to hear the insanity and the expression of what is it to be on time. Because when you're on time, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in the flow of time, and if you're one of those people that theorize that, time is nonlinear function and form, then it's like you're kind of that expression of, I'm going to stamp on time, whether or not that's in alignment with the flow of how that energy works. So again, you're just leaving me here without telling me who you are. So I'm just continuing to jabber away while I'm here in this world. Okay. So again, if you have any comments or questions, you're more than welcome to come in with that. And we'll start very soon. The official beginning of our class. Okay. So since you're here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start us with a meditation. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. Well, why don't we wait just as people start coming in? Hello. Good to see you. Did you want to say your name and where you're coming in from? Oh, wait, hold on. Make sure I can hear you. Okay. Felicity, if you'd like to tell us your name. Also, basically, I'm just taking a few minutes to hear who's in the room, who's joining us. Give us your name, your location, if there's anything specific that you're looking for. Anything specific that you're curious about your own creative process. I should warn you all that I have a very bossy old cat sitting next to me. So if you hear some strange sounds, it might be her announcing her arrival and her opinions on the state of the world. I love that scene from the last Guardians of the Universe movie where they're saying the whole time that like cats are really not that friendly. That like, and then they reveal to be like the scariest monster in the universe at the end. One of my favorite scenes of all times of any movies. So, and I also love to, I don't know how you like to watch, but I love getting to look at everybody, you know, so if, oh, there she goes, she made an appearance. And so if you want to, you know, just be able to focus on me, you can absolutely do that. And if you also want to be able to have that kind of gallery view and really get to experience other people, you know, stories are created by the listeners, you know, our body, you know, and how we respond in our bodies creates this collective expression. It calls out the stories in a different way. So I love it when people turn on their videos and engage. And I'm going to ask questions at different times. And those are authentic questions. And you're, you know, bringing what you're considering or what you're thinking about really adds to our collective conversation. So I just want you to know that when I ask these questions, it's genuine. I love hearing your voice and your perspective, and it deepens our own expression. So one last call to anyone who would like to just tell me their name, where they're beaming in from, and if they have something specific that you are grappling with in terms of who you are as a creator or your creative expression, to speak to that very briefly, and then I will be able to shape our class to you. The other thing is that you can always throw over in the chat room. You know, I'm opening the chat right now. You can always type in your name and your location, and if there's something question that you're working with, then you can bring that there too. Okay, so I am going to begin. So I love to begin by closing our eyes. And as we close our eyes, hello, Elizabeth from New Jersey. As we close our eyes, you know, we close our eyes because storytellers are the seers of the world. So in this moment, I really invite you to bring all of that outward attention of making sense of the world, because that's what we're doing as storytellers. We're making meaning. To close your eyes and to really even like imagine your eyeballs like sinking back into the back of your head, just allowing yourself to really relax that part of you, that seer that's using your eyeballs, that part of you. And I invite you to bring your attention into your heart and just be alive and feel your heart. You can see if you can feel in your body, like where does your heart reside in your body? How much attention can you bring inside of yourself to be able to really, without putting your hand on your chest to feel for the heartbeat, can you really sense where that organ lives inside your body? And as you're doing this, inviting you to start to take some nice deep breaths. And even asking your heart, why are you here today? What brings you to this wild moment in time where you're giving yourself over to an hour of your life to consider who you are as a creative and as a creator? And I'm going to invite you to ask your heart, is there something in you that's ready to emerge? Because I'm not asking your head, I'm asking your heart. Maybe bringing your attention up to your throat, to that third chakra. And just tending to this space and just noticing, does it feel constricted? Does it feel loose? Do you need to roll your shoulder a little bit just to allow that space to open? And as you're in this space, I invite you to just be alive with, is there something that needs to be spoken that lives within you? Or is the muse tapping on your shoulder asking to speak through you? And then maybe you want to connect with your bones. I always invite people, listen to your bones. They're going to tell you the truth. Some of the oldest material. And so ask if there's something, is there a story that you're carrying in your bones that comes maybe from your own wisdom experience? I use the word wisdom and people often get so freaked out. Well, wisdom is just, it's a gem that you've harvested, that you've cultivated, that you've tended. We all have the experience, and wisdom is the intention to make something of it. So there's wisdom living inside of you. And so just inviting you to have this moment of listening for is there something in your bones that's asking to emerge? You don't have to have a linear answer, you're just listening. And allow yourself to be like surprised and delighted and awed by what you hear. You might hear something that you had never considered before, just because you were willing to be humble enough to come deep into yourself and just listen. And then the big question, what is your relationship to your creative process? Are you in the story of the creating is easy and joyful and playful and just one big flow? Or do you have the story that's blocks and it's hard and you need something to do it? There's no right or wrong answer. It's just noticing what emerges from you in this conversation. How are you going to meet us today? How aware are you of your internal stories? The stories that you've learned growing up, the stories that surrounded you from the media. How aware are you of how those internal stories that you inherited influence how you live in and experience the world? And then the simple question of, is there something between you and the creator or the storyteller you most want to be? I'm going to give you a quote, and then I'm going to invite you to respond to any of those things. This quote is by Rebecca Solnit, and says, "We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or hate, to see or be seen, and too often, stories saddle us and they ride us and they whip us onward and they tell us what to do. And we do it without questioning. The task of learning to be free," I'll read that again. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear them, to question them, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. That's by Rebecca Solnit. I'd like to start the process of talking about what it is to be a creator, what it is to be a conscious creator, what it is to be a storyteller, and because with this quote, because it speaks of the progression of, if you can't see the foundation of you're made of in terms of the stories that have made you, and if you can't see that some stories are super allies and here to support your thriving, and some stories might not be here to support your thriving, if you can't distinguish between the two, then how conscious are you of the stories that you yourself tell and why? And so it's a mind twister, that one. I'm going to give you one more quote. "The business of stories is not enchantment." Ah, the business of stories is not escape. What? The business of stories is waking up. And that's Martin Shaw. And again, I like to start with this quote because it speaks to the evolution of what the storyteller and the role of the storyteller and the role of the story is in society. We could go on this for a long time. So I see a bunch more of you have joined, and I want to give you an opportunity if anything came up for you in that meditation. And if you want to just take a moment to write something down, or if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself by briefly saying your name, your location, and if something emerged in that experience and you want to speak to it, I will shape this class to who you are and what your unique, what's alive in you today, in terms of this content. So just want to give you an opportunity to speak anything that wants to be spoken, and then I will dive into this full webinar. Rachel, were you? No. Okay. So Sarah is coming in from Oshawa, Ontario. Hi, Dan from Montreal. Elizabeth from New Jersey. Good to see you. Okay. So here's what's going to happen today. Elizabeth's saying I felt a lot of fear in my throat chakra. Okay. Oh, hello from the Big Island. I was just there. And from okay, so great. When we feel fear in the throat chakra, that's I appreciate you speaking to that. The first thing you can do is just like breathe gently into it. You're like, okay, there's something alive. It's revealing itself. Okay. And sometimes we feel fear and we react to it and we run from it and we're like, I'm out of here, or sometimes we let it clamp us down and constrict us, and what is it to make fear your ally? You're like, because fear, there was a time when used correctly, it saves your life, right? It's like, hey, the dinosaur's coming, run, but also it can say, your peripheral vision, which is interesting, which is how our version of humans evolved, was that when we see something out of the corner of our eyes, no matter what, peripheral vision activates and go into reptilian mind of fight or flight, and we're out of here. So, in some ways, it almost needs our consciousness is also evolving. So while that kept us alive, it also kept us alive in a survival mode. So just because you feel fear, right, just because you see something moving doesn't mean you necessarily have to run. And I mention this only because, I mentioned this a couple of reasons, because on video, when you guys move around a lot, our peripheral vision will be activated, right? So if people are like flailing about, then we can't help but move and look at you. But it also actually changes the way that we think. So they've done research that says that when your peripheral vision is activated, your brain actually goes into that fight or flight mode, and you stop engaging in critical thinking in the same way. You'll actually take things more in as truth and truth and fact, whatever that means. So I mention that because our peripheral vision is actually activated by watching television. So think twice about how your brain takes in information when you're watching television. So, beautiful to see Susanita. Welcome. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Okay, so here's what's going to happen today. I am going to give you a fast and furious introduction to things that you consider as you enter onto the path of what it means to be a conscious creator. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. There's one other thing I want to talk about with dealing with fear. Thank you, Elizabeth. So one of the best ways that you can work with fear is, and this is the same thing with a critical mind, with a comparing mind. We'll say comparing mind is an enemy of the state. It robs you of the expression of beauty because you're always comparing things. So doubt, the critic, these are all great beings. Fear, these are all great beings that can serve us, but we also know they have a shadow. So one of the best ways to engage them and say, hi, how can you work as my ally, right? Fear saves your life, but then sometimes fear can be so constricting that it prevents you from living life or speaking your truth. Then you can just say, one of my easiest, most fun ways to go through is do a little writing exercise. And it goes with, I am fear. I'm here to say, my message is, I am your ally in this, and I am not your ally in this, or I am your challenger in this, And so you can have these conversations, and it can bring you into this engaging witness mind, and it can bring you into that sense of play, which is actually an advanced skill. People in trauma can't play because you have to be able to risk a little bit. So when we engage play in our work, especially when it seems like it's scary, we kind of open the doors up, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. So what we're going to discuss today is I'm going to do a very fast and furious introduction to a lot of different skills that you can integrate in your pathway to what does it mean to be a conscious creator in our times. Okay, and so some of these things I'm gonna run it. I have a teacher, Stephen Jenkinson, and he says, I'm going to throw arrows into the room, and some of them are land and some of them aren't. And so don't worry, you don't have to catch all of them, but just listen for the ones that are specifically resonant for you. And that's why I also love that it's really great when you come into this with as much intention as possible, so that when you come in knowing, I'm really coming for this, somehow there's this there's an extraordinary alchemy that happens in the space, and it can come forward. So listen for what you most need. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the introduction of the landscape of storytelling as a sacred art form. We're going to talk about what does it mean to be a conscious creator. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to open your channel to listen for your unique genius. We're going to get to play a game of, this is one of my favorite games, of what is your apocalyptic archetype? So you're going to get to leave with that today. We're going to talk a little bit all along the way about how to work with story as a tool for transformation. And I'm going to, for those of you who just came from the Masterclass and wanted to get all filled up and nourished, that's where you might choose to leave. And for those who want to continue to stay on and learn about some classes that are going on, I'm going to tell you about Sanctuary, which is a class that starts next week. And then for those who stay on till the very end, we are going to co-create a vision story together. So you'll get to also engage in that creative improv exercise. I just love to say, I love hearing your voices. I love hearing your questions. So please know that at any time you can raise your hand and I will keep an eye out for you, or you can place your comments in the quotes and I will also try to keep track of that. And if I'm going too fast, you can always just wave your hand, give me like that driving, like slow drive. And this is Sonora. Sonora has decided that she's going to be part of our conversation today. So, all right. A little background from me is that I grew up on a farm in Vermont. I was lucky in that my parents really discovered that I had a knack for reading and stories. I was obsessed with stories from a very, very young age, and they cultivated that talent in me. So I got to study writing and acting at a very young age and got involved in a professional acting group when I was in high school. And my parents did something that I don't think I've ever heard of any parents doing before or since, which was when I wanted to go to college for acting school. They said, don't waste our money and your time on studying acting in college. Go find yourself a good acting school, and then we'll talk about college after that. So I went straight to New York City and studied at this premier acting school and got to work off Broadway and summer stock and really learned that there was something very magical that happens in that room, that there's something palpable that happens in the theater and expression of live arts. And I was also very committed to the environment and very committed to social justice. And I wanted to figure out how to kind of harness that energy for change, because I could feel it. People would change in the room from a story, and how to direct it. And that ended up, I ended up working with, ended up getting a master's degree in social work. I ended up working with youth at risk in the wilderness. And I ended up in San Francisco working with documentary filmmakers on how to develop campaigns for social change using the power of story. I eventually ended up working with Al Gore at his Green Channel and was right there, the hub of communicating climate change and the climate narrative, which I now think, by the way, was a very, very dangerous narrative. I'll tell you why. You gotta be so suspect of every narrative. You gotta listen beyond, and look up the etymology of the language. And one of the strangest things I think that the climate change movement did was it created a fear around change. It's so weird. They classed change as the bad guy. And we are on a planet that does nothing but change. It's literally what it's purely designed for. So I just invite you to really think 3 times about every narrative that comes at you and really consider, what are the underlying messages, and is it in a true alignment with the natural world? And I always feel like natural world for me is my immediate resting place, where I can look at a narrative and I can match it. Does this align with how the natural systems of our planet work? Okay. And it gives me something, like the only thing that I can feel grounded in that comparing things to. So anyway, I got involved with that. I got to see firsthand that people don't need more news and information when trying to make sense of the world, and we got to show the data. And the data said people don't want more data. And a little side note, we actually don't even process, we don't metabolize data. As humans, we're made of stories, symbols, metaphor, and we actually make meaning through story. That's actually what's necessary for our systems. So in moments like this in the world, when we've got facts, information, but no greater narrative to place it into, it's a very, very, very confusing for how our body systems work. And so if you're not confused, you're not paying attention right now. And this is like, these times are literally confusing for the humans. So that sounded funny. For the humans, for all of us. So I ended up going and leaving that work and getting really into working with story as a tool for change, and got really into working with story to develop campaigns for social impact and change, and then stepped more and more and more into the truth of what I was, which was coming back into the wilderness setting, working with story there and working with story in ceremony. And that's where I've really had the most extraordinary experience of the alchemy of working with story as a tool for change, and understanding that when you understand story itself, it is a gateway to the mysteries. And so we ended up doing, Elizabeth, I think you spoke about that feeling of tension around your throat. I was actually in a circle with a woman who said, I don't feel like I can speak. I feel like I've got the story of the witch, the story of, when women were killed, for sharing their knowledge. And I went and I listened to that, and I was working in a particular program at that time, coming out as a sacred storyteller. And I listened for what was the story, as they say that there was this woman who, rather than be burned at the stake, she gave her knowledge to the ocean, and the ocean agreed to carry all of her knowledge rather than have it be burned at the stakes, and that the wakame seaweed would carry it. And I got curious about that. So we ended up going in and we created a story ceremony around that woman who had given her knowledge to the ocean, and then we served wakame in that story ceremony so people could come to a place of reclaiming that old knowledge. That's a short example of how we work with story ceremony. So again, your comments inspire the random stories that aren't on my I don't know, what is this thing? It's a PowerPoint. Okay, so let's go to the ancient knowledge. Okay, this is where I love to begin. Let's go back to those who really did know how to listen to the earth. The Hawaiians believe, so whoever's here from the Big Island, yay, the Hawaiians believe that that words could raise enough energy to slow the world or set it in motion. I'm going to say that again, because it's really like, as we look at Einstein and his theory of relativity, right here again are the hints that storytellers have extraordinary power when they have command over their language. So the Hawaiians, who, if you ever have an opportunity to do hula, or my gosh, there's an extraordinary thing happening on Big Island right now with the claiming of sacred land. They're doing hula 3 times a day, connecting their prayers to that earth. And when you see them do that, you understand is to see people that is still in connection with their indigenous understanding of what it is to be in relationship with humans and the divine at once. Whew, it is extraordinary thing to witness. So if you can go online and check that out. But I'll say that again, the Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful, they can raise enough energy to slow the world or set it in motion. The Sicilians believe that words poke holes in the universe. Think about the last time that you said something you couldn't take back. The Australians say that the stories of the past must be sung to the present, so that the future can exist. The Maoris say that the words don't describe the things, that the words are the things. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I'm going to say that again because it's really something to take in, that all of the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, chanted into existence. So these are some of the original keys left to us that really explain humans' unique role on this planet. And I want to say that in a humble way, because most humans don't know actually how to speak the language of other beings, right? So we think that we're the only ones singing, chanting, and speaking our reality into existence. Who knows what the whales are doing and the birds are doing. So I want to be humble when I say that. But it is there. It speaks to our unique role on this planet. And abracadabra is one of the oldest words on the planet. It comes from the ancient Aramaic mysticism, and it means I create as I speak. So let's get on the page, all on the same page. I'm going to ask you a question, and it's a real question that I'm asking you. And so feel free to write in the chat or to raise your hand or take yourself off mute. And the first question is, what is a story? Just get it on the same plane. What is a story? You don't have to know exactly the answer. You can just catch the scent of something and speak it out loud as you wonder with us. There's no wrong answer. This is the amazing thing. Stories are so many things. So Elizabeth is saying a story is a vehicle to take us places. Right. It's like you can time travel and location travel and reality bend and create monsters and create heroes, and you can do all these things. We're doing all this work around VR and all this technology, and yet you and I have this amazing system. Here, I'm going to take you on a journey right now. Let's go to the bottom of the ocean. So once upon a time, at the bottom of the ocean, and the deepest place, and the darkest, deepest cavern on the planet, right there was the most beautiful fairy. And she was really something. I mean, she was so bright that a big bubble of light glistened around her. And they said that every single footstep she took left sparkles trailing behind her. Okay, so how many of you were able to see that image? Okay, great. So here's what happened. I created this image in my mind, or whatever. I don't even know where it comes from. Teresa, I love that thumbs up through there. So there was an image. We don't really know where imagination comes from. It is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries, but somewhere in there, my frontal cortex started to get super activated, and I started to actually see that image. I also started to do something that it's an advanced storytelling skill where I actually started to see myself there. So my language, the pacing started to change, because now I was in the pacing of ocean time. Ocean time is different than me, as you know, talking from right here, right? So a couple different things. At the same time, your frontal cortex started to activate. And while we had this wild, magical experience of going into the deepest cavern, and we each saw to our own vision the most beautiful fairy in the world. Now, I just want to point out something. I did not tell you what the most beautiful fairy in the world looked like. If I had done that, I would have forced some kind of dominant structure of beauty onto your vision, or my structure or my idea of beauty onto you. So as a conscious creator, I actually spoke and I made space for your imagination to decide what is beauty to you. Did she have black hair? Did she have blonde hair? Did she have a pink mohawk? I don't know. She was the most beautiful thing in the world to you. So that's one of the ways. It's like, that's a quick way that you can really think about how do you create space for other people's imaginations to activate, because this is a muscle we really need activated, and not be determining what a good world looks like or what a bad world looks like, or what what beauty looks like, right? We're learning our lessons on that one. So the other thing I just want to point out is like what I'm calling magical, which is that we just like did this wild thing, or we all went to the deepest cavern on the planet, which I don't know if I'll ever get to go there as a human, but I got to feel it there for a moment. What I'm calling magical, Princeton calls neural coupling. And so it's where our brains literally match energies. So thank you for that. Yes, stories can be vehicles that take us places. Robin's saying that it's the effort to make meaning of your life and capture it in such a way that you can share it. I love that. Robin, you just said so much in that one phrase. Hi, Wendy. And so she said a lot of things in this. When you make effort. So I'm saying conscious consideration. So she's right there. I know that she's a conscious creator. And it's if I'm telling you about my journey to the post office, I'm not telling it to you to give the facts and information. How many of us have those people? They really tell us just about how they went to the post office. No, if I'm telling you that I went to the post office, it's because I met someone there who changed my worldview in the simple 20 seconds that we were standing in line together. So it's like they're bringing meaning to their world experience. And then she's also speaking this thing about being this generosity of wanting to give it. So there's two different kinds of stories, or not just two different kinds of stories, there's many different kinds. But let's say that when we work with stories, a transformational tool, there's an arc that happens. So, and just working in that, like when maybe there's a really traumatic event, or maybe we've had a heartbreaking event, or maybe there's something that we're really trying to grapple with. And at first we have to tell that story for us, right? We have to, sometimes the story just needs to be listened to. It needs to be witnessed. And we saw a lot of that in the Me Too movement. There were stories that needed to be known, just to be witnessed. Then there comes this moment when you go to the making meaning, right? What does this mean? How was I changed? What medicine was called out in me from this experience or expression? What gems did I cultivate? The birth is created by constriction, so what constricted and was possibly had a lot of conflict and was very challenging at the moment, but when I came out on the other side, whoa, a whole new life. So again, and there's an arc. And so what Robin is getting to was, she's like, and then there's this moment when you can tell a story and you've done all this work, and now it's a gift for someone else, and it almost stops being about you. And I might do a story at the very end where I share that. Okay, a story is about passing of wisdom, right? Thank you, Felicity. And Dan's saying it's an inner journey that resonates with us and others. So right, and Dan's speaking to that universal truth that lives in what I'm calling sacred stories. So let's go into this other world now, which is, what is a sacred story? Anyone have a gander at what a sacred story might be? No right or wrong answer. Okay, nobody's falling. Oops, Mark, are you trying to speak? If you are, you're on mute. Sarah's saying it's a dance with a mystery. Whoops, Mark, I still can't hear you. Hold on. Oh, and it won't let me take you off mute either. Zoom to this new thing now. There we go. Okay.
It connects us to eternity.
Okay. So it connects us to eternity, and which is Sarah's, like, you guys are weaving from the same tapestry. It's a dance with a mystery. Okay. So Robin's saying, I can feel that it taps this universal truth, right? John Steinbeck says, if the story, and I was saying the story, sacred story, the storyteller isn't about the listener, it will not exist, it will not last. So there's this kind of funny thing where it's not just about you, it's about our greater experience. Teresa says, maybe a story that contains wisdom that touches the divine. Great. Oh, you're using that word, the divine. Beautiful. So here's the thing. When I call something a sacred story, it's a setup. Because the moment I say sacred, that means that I'm calling inherently something not sacred. It's how language can bring us together or take us apart, right? And what are we saying by when something is sacred? We're saying that it brings us into relationship with the divine. We're saying that we see the life and we value the life in all things. It speaks about respecting the life and honoring the life in all things. So you might say, okay, this little plastic lighter here, it's like, this was once a part of the earth. And how can I honor the life of this, the life force in this, rather than treat it as something that's just disposable and not doesn't deserve my respect and value. So when we look at this, greater story of working with story as a sacred, to me that hints to that it has the divine in it. It's a doorway to the mystery. And when we look at that, you're like, okay, that means that when I'm going to tell you a wisdom story, maybe it's not my ego saying, I think you need to learn this, so I'm going to tell you this story to teach you a lesson. That's an ego story, right? And will that person catch it? Who knows? A sacred story to me is, as a creator, as a conscious creator, I actually back up a little bit. You make space for someone else in the room. You enter into that deep listening of not knowing. To me, it's a much easier position to be in, because if it's great, thanks, Muse. If it doesn't, Muse, you got to get better. You're actually learning how to ride the horse. So as a conscious creator, it's more like having, if you're lucky, your hands on the reins while riding a wild horse, and that creative life force takes you on a journey into the realms of creation. And who you are as an individual and all the experiences that you have thus far will definitely inform what you create. And whoever your muse is, you know, and maybe that's the ancestors, or maybe that's the earth speaking out loud, or maybe that's your guides or your muse. We all have different language for that creative divine life force. That's also informing. And I found that some of the stories, some of the things, I just am in a state of awe as I write them. And it's a humbling experience, because I can say, I really haven't had that much life experience to be able to speak to that, but wow, and so to me, that's what working with a sacred story is. It's that conscious relationship with that creative life force, where you're in a collaborative relationship to create something, but the story itself has a life of its own. So when you get really stuck, this is my quick fix to people that come to me oftentimes when they're really stuck. Sometimes I'll go back to them and I'll say, well, what is your story in service to? What did it come here to do? What does it have to say? And sometimes I can help you jump over the hurdle and get you straight into the place of, galloping your story again. One of the things that I would say is that if we're saying, okay, so that's a sacred story, that's nice, but what is a not sacred story? Like what's that? And wait 1 second, because someone's got they're off muted, and you're coming in a little bit, so I'm just going to try to help the background noise. Okay, what is a not sacred story? And so, Teresa's saying the profane. There's a beauty in including the sacred and the profane. It's a beautiful dance. To me, I'm just going to give you a very quick example. I'm just seeing that there's more answers, right? That universal truth. So, to me, Jaws is a very quick and simple example of what a not sacred story is. And to me, it's like, again, the core definition of a sacred story is a story that's here to serve life. It's here in support of life. And so when we look at what would be the antithesis of that, when we look at that story, it was single-handedly responsible for a massive fear of sharks and a massive kill-off of sharks, which is a keystone species that we're actually all reliant on to make sure that the ocean stays in a healthy environment. When Peter Benchley, the writer of that story, understood the power of what had happened in the movie that Steven Spielberg had gone on to make and produce, he spent the rest of his life trying to protect oceans and do ocean conservation work. So I say this as a cautionary tale because I don't think all people who tell dangerous stories or tell stories that I call them zombie stories. They look like a story, they smell like a story, they feel like a story, but they really aren't here to serve life. It's like you want to be on the lookout for those stories, and you can watch them on TV all the time, all day long. And one of the quickest ways is like, how do you feel after you watch that film? It's like, how do you feel alive and like you want to go give yourself to the world, or do you feel like humans should all be banished? It's like it's a quick and easy way to kind of tune in. So, emergent creative process. We're going to start talking about this, developing a little vocabulary for you as you start entering into this world of conscious creator. Does anyone want to take a gander at what is an emergent creative process? Thank you, Teresa. And what I understand, it's like an emergent creative process, and is this process like when you come into creators, one of the things that this is just so you guys know, the times of the unknown and the times of chaos that we are kind of in right now is like, it's a creator's haven, because creators are are made for the chaos. Okay. It's like going to the mall. It's like everything's up for grabs. And you can be like, I'll have some of that, and I'll have some of that, and I'll have some of that. And I'm building myself this new story and this new path and this new way of life, all according to, and here's a creative thing. This is the massive thing, the emergent creative life, the emergent creative process. And what I understand about this is what you're doing in that emergent creative process is you're looking for where the life is. So you're looking for where the life is. When we do this you can do this as a gardener. So here's, as within, so without, as above, so below. How you do anything is how you do everything. So you can apply this to your gardening. You can apply this to, the moment you wake up. And here's a great exercise. Every morning when you wake up, you can just ask yourself, where is my life force today? What do where does my energy want to go? Oh, taxes are almost due. Actually, I really want to go do my taxes. That's strange, but sometimes our life force is like, hey, I just want to take care of business. Or sometimes you might wake up 4 days in a row and you do this, and all you want to do is create a garden. You didn't even know, or all you want to do is go to the ocean. And that's something in you that's saying that's where the life force is. This is what feeds my soul. This is what actually wants to happen. And so you nourish that part of yourself. So there's that part of you in terms of how do we live in strange, quickly changing times. Always go towards where the life is. It's going to bring you towards that path. Where do you feel that? I hate to sound so, Northern California, but where do you feel the yes? It's telling you what your soul is, where the soul is getting that gulp of fresh air. Now, when we work in a storytelling way, what is this emergent creative life force, especially when collaborating? You're always in this kind of, it's sort of like this sensory feeling. Where does the story want to go? What do the characters want to become? And what I'll speak to right now is, as a sacred storyteller, you're always going in with intention, right? You've probably gotten a little bit of this by now. I'm going in to create a story that is going to, reveal my greatest wisdom. It's going to give my inherent gifts. They're going to flow through the story. They're going to be of service to the people who I tell them to. They're going to be a gift to the times I'm living in. I'm coming in service. And so as we do that, then you also have to trust that what is going to come alive in that place is in service of this intention that you set. So you can really have a lot of trust. And you want to trust if there's fear that comes up, if there's confusion, if there's resistance, you got to trust that, because that is actually steering you towards where the creative emergent process is. One of my favorite, I just got to do the most incredible thing. It was really an amazing thing. It was with an advanced group of students. They studied with me last year, sacred storytelling. This was an advanced performance group. And then when they were done, they said, Leah, give us the advanced class now. And I was like, okay, And so I was like, that would be a story ceremony. And so we took on the story of Medea. And because Medea kept knocking at my door, she kept banging. She was like, I want to do a forgiveness ceremony with a lot of people. And I was like, okay. And the first person who I wanted to do the story with refused. She was like, I have no forgiveness in my heart for Medea. She killed her children. I cannot touch that story with you. And I was like, okay. So I put it down and I waited until I had the right group, because I knew it was going to be a big story. So as soon as I put it on Facebook, all these people started coming towards and saying that they wanted to go to this event. So, when you're talking about that universal truth, when you hit that vein, you're like, oh, okay, I don't even know what it is yet, but it's in our collective. So, a lot of us want to work with this story. When we listen deeply to who Medea was and the conflict of the story, I'm not going to go too deep into it right now, because I just want to speak to this emergent creative process. We had Gloria, and Gloria was just like so stubborn. She just was like, just couldn't get off this one thing that wasn't working. And it was so inconvenient. She was such a pain in the butt. But I know how the emergent creative process works. And she was fighting for something. She was fighting for some light that she could feel in the story and wasn't there. And so we stayed with her, even though it was really inconvenient. And we stayed with her through this fight, because she was fighting for the right thing. It wasn't her ego that was involved. It was something else. It was that creative life force. So you always have to ask, when you're creating, especially when you're collaborating and you're feeling that fight, is it your ego because you want to be right? Or can you feel something that won't settle because it wants to come through you? And it's just experience where you get to determine those different things. She ended up discovering probably one of the most extraordinary parts of our story, which was coming through Medea, which ended up leading us to this massive part in our 200-person ceremony, where we got to break the spell that people were under, because that's one of the things that she was dealing with. So I'll leave you with that question, and you might just want to play with it over the next days. It's like, what spell from our culture, from our country, from the time that we're living in, have you been living under that you are ready to break? So it could be the spell of consumerism. There's so many different kinds of spells that we're living under. So that's a little bit on the emergent creative process. And in that space, I'll make a vibe for psychic silence. We need psychic silence. Our psychic silence is that space where it's all stilled. So when I can really hear, not just, whatever unsettled relationship situation I have with someone in my life. That's always banging, because if that's always banging, that's like taking up real estate and my space as a creative. So it's like, I really believe that if you really want to be a conscious creator in our time, you got to do your work so that you're not harboring resentments and then pushing them through what you're creating, or all your unsettled stuff. It's like you can heal that through your work, and it's really powerful and very potent when you amplify your healing, when you do it really consciously through your storytelling. So there's ways to do it, but I always but when you're really aware of, when you can come to that place of really seeing what's in your psychic space, so that then you can consciously work with it and consciously maneuver with it. So speaking of that psychic space, what is your imagination? Does anyone want to speak to what is imagination? Thank you, Dan. Anyone feeling the call to take on this wild, mysterious thing of imagination? I see typing going on. I also always like to ask people, like, what does it mean to be a creator? That's a big one. What does it mean to be a creator? And even more so, just checking what's in the back of your mind. Were you told that you couldn't do it? Were you told that certain people could create and other people couldn't? Again, nice things just to be aligned with. Okay, so Elizabeth's saying my creative mind is mixed with pixie dust. So that's great. There's gonna be sparkle in your stories, and I love that kind of play with that. Yeah, it's imagination. It's really this thing that is unexplainable, unknowable. It could be, a lot of, the mystics would say we're seeing what's on the other side. That we have this doorway to other dimensions, and that we see it through this unknowable, unseeable, unexplainable way, and that there's many different ways to get there. Sometimes you can just go, I'm in the mythic dimension, I'm going to see there. Others might say, oh, I need a big meditation process where I ground and source and build those muscles. But when I'm going to really encourage you always to use your imagination, because as soon as our imagination stops, it's like our possibilities come to a quick end. And that's why I really also want to make a vibe for imagination. I was listening to Judy Bloom the other day. She's got one of those master classes, and she was saying, I feel so bad for people out on walks where they're listening to podcasts and stuff, because that's where I get my best ideas, and I would vie for creating as much space in your life as possible when you're not constantly being bombarded by everyone else's thoughts, ideas, and ways, so that you can come into that quiet place of understanding what is yours. And getting to hear from your own muse. Dan saying it's free, soft, open, golden field where we can lie down and receive the ideas from the greater beyond. I love that. Looks beautiful. I want to talk a little bit about genius. And genius, how many people get afraid when I say that you have genius in you? Or are you just like, yeah, I got genius in me and it works? Yes, I'm seeing some nods. I'm seeing a little bit. I love this word. And yes, Teresa, I love Teresa's thumbs up. I've never seen this on Zoom before. It's really fun. So it's, genius. Michael Mead has a really beautiful explanation of it. And I really feel like it's almost a responsibility to tap into our genius. And it's not just Einstein, who was born just so kind of brilliant. It's someone who tapped into his genius, and all of our genius looks and feels and senses in different ways. And our world doesn't necessarily designed to see all different kinds of geniuses. So it requires a certain kind of fortitude and strength to be able to claim your genius, especially if it doesn't fit into one of our, pre-designed roles and structures. So Michael May describes it as, how does a person find stability and grounding in a world that's more and more chaotic? And many of the most troubling questions in life can be found by turning towards each one's true purpose in life, their inner genius. So it's that thing that just like lights you up. Each person carries a unique way of seeing the world. And it is this rich diversity of perspectives and styles and talents and aptitudes that is the greatest resources we have as a global community when it comes to facing our greatest challenges. And I feel like we might have, like, as a collective, come on board to understanding in a new way how important it is to really truly celebrate all the different perspectives of seeing and experiencing this world, and that they're all equally valued. The idea is that rather than seeing each person as coming into this uncertain world empty, so this is his core description of genius, each of us is already someone, we already carry these important gifts to the world. And so there's something seated inside of each of us, waiting to be awoken, ready to lead us to the path to our true identity and our true purpose in life. So I'm always kind of taken by a lot of times when I've been doing these courses for a long time. I've seen a lot of women in particular who will speak to the frustration, the struggle of not being able to speak. And they'll even like have this one, I got to see so many people do it so many times. They made the same gesture even. Then after seeing them so many times, I was like, you guys kind of look like a seed unfurling. And I was like, that's the, there's that meme. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where it's the seed that's like right before the light. And it's like, it doesn't know where it is in context. It's just really freaking dark and scary in there. It's like it came to life and it started to grow and grow and grow, but it's still dark and it can't really see anything until finally, poof, it pops up. And you're like, chlorophyll, light. I can see around me. I've got some perspective, and so I think of that sometimes because I love to play in the mythic dimension and what is the greater mythic story of our time. And it does feel like a lot of people's seeds just got super activated, and in this great unveiling, what is apocalypse? You got to know the roots of words. This is a great word that has been totally hijacked to mean the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. It's just the end of the world as we know it. Apocalypse means, in the etymology, it's the lifting of the veils. It's getting to see behind the curtain. And I feel like we're seeing that in our society, in our country, in our global systems, but also I don't know about for you, but this past, 3 months, it's like I've even been able to see behind my own curtain. I'm like, whoa, there's the real truth. I thought I was operating this other truth, but how many people was I trying to please? So it's this real, particularly powerful, potent moment. If you're into astrology, we've even got 5 planets in retrograde. It's begging us to review and to reflect. And to, as a collective, really come out with, if the systems that we've known are going to change and transform, as more than ever, conscious creators are needed. And remember this, because they're the ones that love chaos, because you create out of chaos. It's like you've got this heat beacon and you're like, where's the life? Where's the life? What wants to be created out of this? If that door closing, that's fine. I'm going to go towards that other open door. And so it works in your stories and it works in your life that way. So, or can work. It's all about how you do it yourself. Okay. So skill building. I want to give you, I promise, a couple of fun little exercises that we're going to do. And like I said, I'm going to throw lots of arrows and we're going really fast, and you might be writing some of this down. You want to play with it more, but this is one of my favorite skill building activities in storytelling and in life. And this skill building is about really engaging the mythic dimension, the other side, and understanding that we're all made up of many different things. And so oftentimes, we'll say the hero's journey has been very glorified, especially in our culture. And so many of our stories are just like, just thrown on that structure. Problem with the hero's journey, while it might be lovely, is that if you really look at it, it is a very male-dominated structure. Men and women live in both of us. So I'm not saying men. I'm saying like that masculine-dominated structure. It says you have to go outside of your home. You have to find a monster. You got to kill it to discover who you are and where your gifts are. And then you got to come back. So that is a very masculine-dominated structure in storytelling. A feminine version of a storytelling would be, you go within, that the monster lives within. And maybe it's not about killing it, but maybe it's about learning how to live with it and how to understand its strengths and its weaknesses. Okay. So when we change that structure, so this is kind of ways that you can look at different mythic structures and understand how they're unconsciously informing what you expect out of life and what you expect your role to be in life. So now let's take someone who's acting like a monster in your life. Robin's asking me to repeat that. I don't know what you're asking me to repeat. If you can give me a little hint, I can go back. um, so male versus female. Okay, so what we're going to say is that there's masculine forms and there's feminine forms. Masculine and feminine forms live inside of all of us, right? So, it's like I can have a masculine form of myself. I can have a feminine form of myself. So I want to use those words rather than male, female. This is the hero's journey is a masculine dominant structure of storytelling because it has this, what do we know about stereotypical, I'm just being very stereotypical, masculine structure, form, right? Direction, purpose. These are classic masculine identities. Feminine, chaos, flow, different kind of energy. So when we look at the hero's journey, it's a masculine form when you're going out to be a protector, to find out who you are. And part of that inherent journey is that you have to slay something. You've got to kill something. And in that structure, it's outside of yourself. It's outside of the village. So we're in sort of a classic thing where we have to that means that we always have to have a villain. We always have to have a bad guy for that story structure. So now look at the United States system. Wow, have we made some good bad guys? We're experts at this. So be suspect. Because it's a very one-dimensional way of seeing the world. And this is what I want to play with you right now. So I invite you to consider someone who is a real bad guy in your life, the neighbor that just won't give you any peace, that boyfriend that betrayed you, or that girlfriend that cheated on you, someone who is just your boss that can't ever be nice. There's a bad guy. Maybe it's in your immediate world, maybe it's in your out world. Now I'm going to ask you to flip the whole story. And what if that was actually someone who was a master teacher, who came in service of your soul to call out your gifts and your strengths and to teach you something that no one else could? Sometimes we choose our master teachers. Sometimes our master teachers choose us. To me, this is one of I loved working with this in stories and telling stories and doing storytelling, because again, it will provide people a bigger way to see the world, just the way that it looks. There's a classic saying in storytelling, what looks like a curse could be a blessing. What looks like a blessing could be a curse. You don't know until the story's done. And so how do you stay so alive in your story is to not be betrayed by the moment, rather than seeing something in the greater context of what it is. And sometimes you just can't tell that until the story's done. So that's one game that you can play. I find this both in my storytelling and in my personal life, one of the quickest and easiest ways to bring peace to my life. If someone is just really there, I have to take a pause and be like, oh, what do they have to teach me? And why don't I focus on that? Because I can't change them. Can't change them. But I sure can change how I respond to this moment. Okay, so that's one skill building. Here's another skill building piece I'm going to offer you. What is your apocalyptic archetype? What is your apocalyptic archetype? So again, we know that apocalypse means it's a lifting of the veils. So who are you in other dimensions? What are you going to be no matter what? And I feel like this is, again, a really important skill for this moment. So come back to think about, what is your essence? What is the essence and what is the metaphor? What is metaphor but the language of spirit? That's what metaphor is. So what is your essence self and what do you do no matter what? So are you a gardener? And you're always going to plant seeds for hope, for change for the better? And you garden outside, but you also garden with your friends? Are you a bridge builder? It's like, are you always going to be building a bridge to a better future? Or towards healing? Or towards joy? Are you the lover? Are you the mirror that's going to be like, I'm going to make you look at what's happening right now, and I'm not going to let you off the hook? So I'm going to invite you to play with this. I like creating fantastic titles for my archetypal for my apocalyptic archetype because it makes it really fun. So if anyone wants to play, we can do this for a couple moments. And if you just want to, you don't even quite know, but you're just going to start playing with your essence, we can tease it out with you. So Elizabeth is kind-hearted. Okay. So, I'm going to speak to something around this where we said a lot of times, especially at the beginning of COVID, I saw a lot of people feeling so much grief. And some of the people that I heard were very ashamed of the grief that they were feeling. And this is where it's like, if we could have a bigger language around the roles that we play. I'm like, oh my God, you guys are the great metabolizers. It's like you're feeling grief when other people aren't willing to. Thank God that we have people that were willing to hold and feel and transmute and transform the grief with their tears, because what do tears do? But they are the things that water the seeds for the future. You have to have that grief. It's a critical part of the transition. So, great. So we're seeing kind-hearted. So Elizabeth is kind-hearted. So we have our Queen of Hearts. She's going to be kind to someone at the post office, with her mask on. She's going to be kind to the telemarketer that calls her. She's that pulse of love that's always present. And what do we know about love? There's a ripple effect. We just never know what one kind action to a stranger, a kind glance could actually change how they treat the next person, the next person, the next person. So this is like no joke. This whole conscious place of like, I'm going to be kind no matter where I go. I'm always holding that place in our world, no matter what happens. The midwife of ideas. So this is, in some ways, this could be someone, Teresa. Teresa might look like a coach on her job title, but really, what is she doing? But she understands what it is to hold someone at the threshold of birth and death, and how someone bringing forth new ideas really needs to be held through that time. What nourishment do they need? Susanita is saying she's a space holder. So she might be a keeper of the temple. What is the temple? But it's the place where we can have that communion to the divine. Rachel's saying, how do we start getting clarity on this? There are so many possible answers. And hopefully you have a million different answers. I think that's just it. It's like, we are not just one archetype. For me, I'm building bridges, as I'm definitely like going to build a couple of bridges. I'm also gardening everywhere I go, and that might look like very literal things. It might look like actually planting a garden in my back porch, or it might look like planting flowers where they've done all the looting in LA, just to bring some beauty, and planting these seeds of all these different ways of what to be and how to engage yourselves as conscious creator. It's the same action, just playing out in different ways. So just play with it. I think it's so easy. This exercise is so deceptively easy. That's where it can go sideways. It's a thing that is your joy place. You just go there because you can't help it. You might not get to go there enough because you might live under the idea that it's so easy. It's just so easy for you to do. It takes no effort. And how could that be of value? That's a great trapping that our world has put on this. So I would say, where's your greatest joy? I seem to be fresh air. Oh, Felicity, this is great. Wherever we need to enhance our ability to thrive. Someone who brings that joy. My dad's a little bit like that. Doesn't matter what's going on. He always brings this kind of joyful way of living in the world. That breath of fresh air. Robin is a laughing teacher. So she's Buddha. That one who can be that wise one who can, no matter what's happening, can find that place to laugh at it all. And Teresa's saying, Teresa's saying she has to go. Okay. Sarah's saying she's a light carrier, right? So you're the holder of the torch. You could be shining light in the darkness and the shadows, bringing light to the dark places. Rachel is saying, thank you for that clarification. Dan saying, I'm a silence nature tuner and always an amused fox. That's great. I love this expression. Tuning into the silence of nature, maybe even being the voice of the earth. So, great beings, if you came for just what it was to be introduced to all these wild things, then this is what we did today. And I'm going to leave you with a quote. And then for those of you who would like to stay on and I can explain to you about the next class that's coming up and how you can participate, we'll do that. And for those of you who want to do the vision story at the end, we'll do that at the very, very end. It's one of my favorite things to do. Okay, here's your quote. Act as if you are people of consequence so that I can treat you as such and that you matter. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? I'm going to read that again because it's just devastating to me every time I read it. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? It's a velvet gauntlet, this idea of being of consequence. It doesn't clink when it hits the ground, but you can feel it. It would be proper to proceed that there is consequence to us being here. That's Stephen Jenkinson. So I'd like to leave you with that because, may you really understand the power of your words and what you speak and what you create. And that every day as you speak and you tell your story and the stories of our time, you are creating. And so bless you on your journey as being conscious creators because you are needed at this time. And thank you to everyone who's writing really lovely comments. I always really deeply appreciate hearing how it lands. And now I'm going to tell you about a brand new class that's coming up. And it's going to start next, the 30th, I believe. And we're going to meet for 6 weeks. And this story is called Sanctuary. And this is really something else. I got to tell you, I'm going to put in a bunch of links in here so that you can just see all the different ways that you can be in contact. I'm just going to put this into the chat box. And I'll also just put my email in case you want to be in touch. Obviously, you have our email. So Sanctuary is right there, and it's a course that was born out of COVID. And so when the students from my last class asked if they could have that guidebook on psychic silence, because I wrote a whole guidebook on how to be a conscious creator and how to work with psychic silence, specifically using ritual and ceremony as a way to transform what you discover so that it can really serve you as a creator. And so as I started to do this, I had this most inspired time of my life, I have to say. And my dreams were waking me up, and it was telling me that's where the name Creator Matrix came from. And I was like, Creative Matrix, everyone's going to say Keanu Reeves, but really the whole book is designed to give you an idea of how to discover what's living in your psychic space and how does it affect what you do and don't create. And it comes right down to the core of finding what is your, we played with our apocalyptic archetype, but what is your creator archetype? Are you a Gaia who can create out of chaos? Or are you a Saturn and you need structure and discipline and order to really thrive? Are you a starter and can start any fire? Or are you, someone that actually, but you need someone to help you end? Or are you a closer? You don't like to start, you don't like to build, but man, you can close something down, And so the more clear that you get on who you are as a creator, and what I have found is that, initially I started this and so the class is unlike any other class that I've done, because a lot of the other classes are just mostly focused on storytellers. This is really for anyone who wants to explore who they are as a creator. So you might be building houses, or you might be writing a book. And what we're doing is an embodied practice. So we go into the bedroom and we empty it out and we transform it into a sacred space. And so it's the idea of, and here's what I understand, is that as a sacred storyteller, your story is a temple. It's a place that people can go where they can commune with the divine and the divinity within themselves. And it's a place where they can go and not be judged or valued or not valued based on what they see in themselves, based on the story that you tell. It's a very intimate experience. And so as we prepare ourselves to be the tenders of those temples, how do you, as we prepare ourselves to build those temples, how are you the temple keeper? How do you treat yourself as sacred and as a divine being? And so one of the ways that I understand it, it's a very non-linear course that has a very linear approach, where we together as a group will go into our bedroom and we will transform it into a sacred space. And it's a step-by-step guide. We have over 6 weeks, and you'll be given different exercises each week as you go on this evolutionary journey to explore what's living in your psychic space and how can you alchemize and transform it through ritual and ceremony so that it's really in service to you as a creator. So you'll get to learn a lot of different rituals and a lot of different things to work with what you discover in that space. And along the way, I've brought on 5 incredible guest teachers. Diana will actually go to what is it to become a temple keeper, and she's going to teach us some of the. She's one of the very few people on the planet that's holding the wisdom of what it means to be an anointing the self and other. And again, you're like, why are we doing an anointing class for a sacred story creating class? And it's really taking seriously, what is it to have consequence in this world? What is it to understand your influence and impact on those around you? And as you are able to create the divine in your own expression of life, that will ripple up and give more and more permission to other people to live in that and to find that part in themselves. Then we're going to meet with Elaine Kalila, who runs the Priestess Presence Mystery School. And she's going to talk a lot about just the tangible elements of what is to hold a temple and create a sacred space. We've got Alika Alakai from Maui, who is an indigenous farmer and practices the old Hawaiian way, so spiritual gardening. And again, you're like, wait a second, I thought we were doing a class on story and creating, and now we're doing gardening. And again, it's that as within, so without. Yes, we're actually going to be doing some rituals where you plant seeds in the earth. And I thought it was going to be a really extraordinary thing to, and to me, it's like, what are we doing when we gather right now? What group are we claiming ourselves as belonging to? And what are we committing ourselves to as a group in the times that we're living in? And so one of the things that I'm really committed to is giving a place for these old ancient wisdom ways to be continued to be carried. And so it was very important to me to bring in our wisdom teachers and to also understand, again, as within, so, as above, so below. You learn how to do spiritual gardening on your land and how to work in a way on your land where it doesn't involve miracle grow. You also know how to do that as a storyteller, how to plant seeds that can grow and thrive. That's what we're doing as storytellers. We're always planting seeds. And then our last teacher, I believe, is Kristen. And Kristen is oh my gosh, no, I forgot 2 teachers. Okay, there's Kristen, who is teaching us, bringing us into an intuitive drawing class, and absolutely amazing. So you get to create your own sacred symbol in your space. And we also have Brooke Medicine Eagle, who wrote an extraordinary book on, I think, White Buffalo Woman is Singing. I don't think that's the exact title. But she was one of the first women from her tradition that brought the indigenous wisdom to Western culture. And so she's going to teach us, I guess, again, the groundwork and framework and introduction to how to work with ritual and how to work with ceremony. So this is all in the background that you get to take in, that will be in your psyche as you do this greater work of understanding who you are as a conscious creator, as you create a sanctuary, and as you prepare to step in to be a sacred storyteller or a conscious creator in our times. So that is Sanctuary, and it begins on June 30th. And for people who, it's the beginning of a year-long program. And what we do is we come together for 6 weeks, then we take 3 weeks, 2 weeks off, and we come for 4 weeks to tell the story from what we gathered. So you'll understand, oh, I know who I am as a conscious creator. Now I'm going to go straight into mythos. And mythos is a 4-week class where you get to really discover your own creation myth, your specific creation myth. So we'll get to learn old creation myths from around the world, while you yourself are developing your own creation story. You'll get to workshop it with other people. You'll also get a chance to get performance coaching, so as you tell it, you'll get some real experience in how to tell your story. And by the time that you're done with that story, you'll be like, wow, I've got it all. So for people that want to sign up for Sanctuary, it's a screaming deal, I have to say. I think you get 10 10 classes, more than 10 classes, 11 classes for $350. All of those are live. And I always say, come live if you can. Not everyone can come live. And if you can't, you'll get the recording, but it's obviously like just a lot more fun. And the classes are very dynamic and interactional. I'll never talk this much during one of our classes. And the other thing about Sanctuary I'll say is that you also work with a small group outside of class. So you've got that great support. And one of the things I love about, different groups is I've had groups that in last year's class, that group, they're like, class is done, but we're still meeting. That group is still a really powerful group. They came together and they gathered around something that with passion and purpose, and that's continuing to support their creative process even after the class. And then for people who sign up for Sanctuary and Mythos at once, I do something wild and delicious, and you get the full library of all of my Master Sacred Storyteller teachers. So that's everyone from Michael Mee to Charles Eisenstein to Carolyn Casey. Like, it's an extraordinary over 30 hours of teachers. And for those of you who are feeling the vibe and just need a little extra something to inspire you to register today, for anyone that registers today, I'm going to include my Love Medicine bundle. And so this is something that you don't even have to wait for class to start before you get going. And this is a class this is a meditation that you get a soul story and a meditation and an exercise for how to create a healing love story for yourself. And so it's a really fun thing to do. Does anyone have questions about sanctuary?